Salvatore Miki, my name is Noddy7, strategy game YouTuber and Twitch streamer in general of the Albatross Legion. Welcome back to another episode in my EU4 beginners tutorial series, where tonight we are going to take a look at trade. So trade is one of the most discussed and theory crafted aspects from EU4. From optimal strategies to just trying to understand what the hell's going on, because when you look at this screen, it can be damn confusing. A lot of new players, and even players with hundreds of hours in the game, don't know how trade works, what the best thing to do with trade is, and how to handle it. And so they quite often just ignore it. They'll put merchants collecting all over the place, and just basically do whatever they think's best, which may not be the right way to do it. The main thing to remember with these videos is I'm not trying to teach optimal meta strategies with any of these videos. The idea behind all of these videos is to help people gain a better understanding of the systems and hopefully improve their overall gameplay. I'm not expecting to teach players with thousands of hours in the game new things. This is for those newer players, or even players with some number of hours who may not understand specific parts of the game. This is following on from my previous video about aggressive expansion and coalitions. Yeah, so my plan with this video is try and break down trade and give you the basic concept of everything that goes into trade in the game. I'm going to talk about trade value, trade power, steering versus collecting, and then go into a general strategies around how to optimize your trade income, and finish off with a bit of an honorable mention about trade companies. Before we begin, let me say thanks to everyone for watching this tutorial series. I appreciate all the support, and as always, if you want me to cover a specific topic, please leave a comment below and let me know what you want me to cover. My plan after this trade video is probably to go into some country-specific guides, starting off with some of the big boys like France and Spain and even England. Finally, if you do enjoy the series, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more future content. Right, let's get into it. So trade value. So what is trade value? Every single province in the game has local trade value, which you can see right here. And the game actually tells you it's the value of the trade good and the local goods produced, which is exactly how it's worked out. So it's the value of the trade good produced there, which is two ducats for grain, multiplied by the goods produced, which you can see here. So our goods produced here is currently 0.88 because the religion, we've got intolerance to the religion. And then what that does is it impacts your actual production income from the province, which you can see here. So that's how much we make based on the goods produced times by the value of the trade good. But it also puts that value into the node. So our local node is the English channel. So there it puts some of that value goes into the node here itself, and it's seen as local here. So we actually might be able to see this. What's one that's right at the top of there? So London's at the top, so 1.76. So if we go to London, so the trade value is 21.16. That's probably a, yeah, so that's a monthly amount. You can see that the yearly amount says 21.16. So you can see that value goes straight into the trade node. The local trade value of every single province is the node. It's added together to get the trade value of the node. So the the local value of the node is the sum of all those provinces. So the total value in the node is the sum of the incoming plus the local minus the outgoing. Now obviously we'll get onto end nodes, but the English channel is an end node, so there's no outgoing. So if we have a look at Champagne here, you can see incoming, local, outgoing, and then our total value. So real simple. So that's what trade value is. That is how the money is produced and put into the trade node, which you can then collect the money from the trade node to get trade income. It is worth mentioning here goods produced. So we mentioned it quickly, you can see it here. So goods produced is a modifier that boosts the amount of goods produced in a province. Exactly what it says. Increasing your production value of the province and therefore the trade value. So it increases the amount, the production value here, so the amount of money you make from production, and it also increases the trade value, so what goes into the node. This is the reason why manufactories are so strong. So if we have a look at a manufactory here, it increases the local goods produced by 1. So this would go up to 1.88, okay, which is going to increase the trade value. It's going to increase the production value. That's why manufactories are so strong. It increases so much of your production. Right. So the next thing we want to talk about is going to be local trade power. So local trade power, put simply, is the trade power of the individual provinces within a node which contribute to your total control over the node. So you can see here, it's listed here, trade power of this province. Local trade power can be boosted by trade buildings. So if we build, where's the trade buildings? I'm blind. At the top here, you can see we can get 100, so 50, 100, 125% extra. So that would times this number. Centers of trades and estuaries. So you can see if we go to London, we have an entreport, which is a center of trade. And yes, and the Thames estuary. So these both increase the local trade. So you can see here the local trade power of London is 44 as opposed to Essex is 4. So the centers of trade really, sorry, it's not a center of trade. Yes, it is. It's just been upgraded. Sorry. So yeah, and then you can upgrade these as well to, there's 3 levels of them. I was getting confused because it was called an entreport. My bad. So any nation that has 10 provincial trade power in the node also gets propagation upstream. So what that means is if you have 10 trade power here, you're going to get a bit of trade power in all the nodes that feed into the English Channel. So we would get trade power in all of these 3, even without a province. So you can see we've got trade power in Lübeck at the moment, and we don't actually have any provinces in the Lübeck node. So if we can find ourselves on here, our trade power mostly comes from, it'll be from propagation. So it's coming back upstream, and then it's got multipliers added to it. Mercantilism, which can be found here in the trade tab, also boosts your local trade power modifier. Every point of mercantilism you get, it increases your local province trade power. That basically sums up how local trade power works. And oh, sorry, you can also use light ships, of course, my mistake, forgot that one off my list, to boost your local trade power in your node. So you send your light ships to protect trade power, and they will boost your trade power within that node by how many light ships you've got. A few more things to mention before we go on to the next segment. Global trade power is a modifier which increases your trade power for nearly all purposes in all nodes that you are active in. So you can see, I think the only way to see global trade power is in these modifiers here. So global trade power. So that affects every node you're playing in. Trade steering is a multiplicative bonus, which can be seen here, which is used when factored in your trade power when steering trade. So when using a merchant to steer trade in a specific direction. Caravan power is active in inland nodes Oh, there it is. It says trade steering bonus when you're steering to, from, or collecting in an inland node. Trade efficiency, which again, trade efficiency is here. Trade efficiency is a bonus modifier to the actual income you make from trade. So whatever your actual income that comes in, it's then multiplied by your trade efficiency to give you your actual trade income. The next thing to mention is end nodes. So currently within the game, there are only 3 of these, and they are the English Channel, Genoa, and Venice. So an end node is denoted by the fact that there is no trade route, line, flow, whatever you want to call it, out of the node. So you can see there is no outgoing from any of these 3. These are the only 3 of these in the game. The reason why this is significant is it means that people can't steal your trade from an end node, because even if they've got propagation, they can't propagate upstream from an end node and steal trade, even if they've got no power. So even if you had all of the provinces in the Champagne node, you're still going to lose trade power out of the node because it's got other nodes that lead into it. So you're going to lose some trade flowing out. You're always going to lose some trade flowing out. So end nodes are particularly strong because of this reason, and this is the reason why most people recommend you try and steer and collect and have your home node as an end node. Your home node is where your main trade city is. So this starts with your capital. You can move it separate to your capital. So you can see here, well, it's a bad. So I could move it over to Ireland if I wanted to. But I need 200 dip, which I don't have. So you can move it out of the node you're in. So for example, if we were playing France, it would start in Paris. Oops, Paris is over there. And then we could, once we took enough of the channel, we could move it to London, say, because we want to collect in the end node, not here. Or we might come down to Genoa, as an example. You always collect in your home node, even without a merchant present. So you always collect in your home node. If you put a merchant there, it boosts the income, but you always collect in your home node without a merchant. So let's get into the meat and bones of the subject, which is collecting versus steering and general trade strategy. So merchants in the game have 2 functions. They can collect trade, or they can transfer trade. I need one that's, well, I could just do. So they can collect or they can transfer. Collecting does exactly what it says in the box. You use your local trade power in the node to collect money, which is then multiplied by your trade efficiency to give you income. What isn't apparently obvious about collecting is that if you collect in a node that is not your home node, you suffer a 50% penalty to your local trade power, which means you collect a lot less unless you dominate the node. This means that it's, even if you have, if we were to collect from here, we would be collecting very little because 1, there's not a lot of value, and we would lose 50% of our trade power in this node. Steering is when you use your local trade power to push the trade down a predetermined flow into another node. So for example, the merchant here is currently steering 5 ducats from the North Sea into the channel. One thing that people often don't realize about steering is that it also boosts the value of the trade steered anywhere from 5 to 12%, depending on how many merchants are steering out of the node. The other feature that new players often overlook, along with previously mentioned penalty to collecting outside your home node, is that if you only collect in your home node, you receive a 10% bonus to trade power for every single merchant you have steering. So if we've currently got 8 merchants, if they're all steering, gives an 80% bonus trade power. So let's jump in and have a quick look. At Naj. So when putting all of these things we've just spoken about together for a general strategy when playing EU4, the most obvious thing is that collecting in multiple nodes is generally a bad thing. The reason we say generally is because of a situation like this, where we're starting as a small power with very little power in our home node, very little power in our surrounding nodes, which means that if we were to set up to steer, chances are we wouldn't make as much money as we're going to make if we just choose to collect. So even with the 50% penalty, collecting in 3 nodes is probably going to outweigh steering and collecting. But hey, let's have a look. So just as a bit of an example, we're going to let the game run. We're currently collecting in our home node. We're going to tell the merchants to go. We want to steer. My other guy didn't go. She won't do it there. We'll do it here because we've got power here. I know we don't have range. Never mind. Okay, we're doing it here. So we're going to steer these two. Let the game update. Okay, so we're now steering into this node. If you have a quick look, you can see what we spoke about. So we're getting 2 lots of 10% bonus for the transferring. And we are making a grand total of 0.13 ducats from trade in Basra, which we're auto collecting. Very, very little. We're actually sending more forward and then not getting it. So what happens if we change these both to collecting? Now remember, these are both going to collect at a 50% reduced amount because of outside of a home node. So we're making 0.17. So you can see we're making more. It's not a hell of a lot more, but it is more. So we're only making 0.3 because if you go and have a look, we're at negative 47% because we're collecting not from our main city. So we're making barely any more, but you can see that it is more valuable to us in this current situation to collect from multiple nodes. And this is really easy to test. You can do exactly what we did just then. We set it up, we did the transfer, we had a look at the income, and then we did the collect, and we clearly made more. But aside from these fairly small outlier cases, your general strategy in trade for EU4 should always be dominate your home node. You need to find out where your best home node is and set out to dominate it. Generally speaking, you want to target end nodes. But in this example as Nudge, aiming for an end node, which are up here, it's a pretty lofty goal. So we're better off just looking for somewhere like either our current node in Basra, or potentially the Persia node, or even the Hormuz node. In my personal opinion, Persia would be the better option. Reason being that Persia just has it's got a lot more centers of trade. It's a bigger node that we can dominate, and if we can steer that trade that little bit further, we make a little bit more money from it. So if I was playing as Naj, I'd probably be trying to break into Persia and make that my home node. Dominate the Persian node, push the trade up. And the other reason is because we can drag the Indian trade this way as well. So we can kind of get 2 different routes through India up to Persia. So while you're dominating your home node, you also want to try and take over the upstream parts of your home node. So again, using this example from Naj, we want to dominate Hormuz. We want to dominate the Gulf of Aden. We want to dominate Gujarat and slowly take over India, because then we can start steering all this trade down to Basra, Persia, whichever one we decide as our home node. So the general strategy follows for the rest of the game. You want to try and steer trade through as many nodes as possible to get it to your end node, which you dominate and collect in. Jumping back into the Great Britain game. As we mentioned earlier, steering every single node you steer through boosts the value of that trade by 5 to 12% depending on the number of merchants steering. So you can basically steer your trade all the way from China. We can go Hangzhou. So we can go down to Malacca. And then from Malacca, we can go to Bengal. From Bengal, we can go to Coromandel. From the Coromandel, we can go to Gujarat, to the Gulf of Aden, to Zanzibar, to the Cape, the Ivory Coast, and then from the Ivory Coast, we can go up to the English Channel. So that's, how many nodes is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's 9 nodes we can transfer through. So every single time we transfer through one of those nodes, it's boosted by at minimum 5% by our merchants, if we've got a merchant there. Not to mention, we can also set up one to go from Canton to the Philippines to the Moluccas and then into Malacca, boosting the value in Malacca. We can also get a merchant in Doab to go to Doab to Deccan to Gujarat, or Doab to Lahore to Gujarat. So we can pull all of this trade down in towards the Gulf of Aden and then down to Zanzibar to the Cape. It's worth mentioning here nodes with single exit or flow directions, like the Cape of Good Hope. For nodes you dominate like this, there's no reason to put a merchant here other than to boost the income by that 5%. If we dominate, we don't currently, but if we did dominate this node, so if we were the only one here, we're not collecting, so all the values automatically being pushed out. All of the incoming values automatically going out. There's no need for us to put a merchant here, except if we've got an extra merchant, because it'll boost the trade again. Boost the value of the trade. There are many nodes like this that you don't need to steer trade from. There's a lot of single exit nodes. Another one on the way is... Well, that's probably it. Zanzibar. Yeah, Zanzibar. So Zanzibar's only got one exit as well. So technically you don't need to. The problem with Zanzibar is you'd have to dominate it because there's lots of nations around here that would collect. The best place to concentrate merchants at the beginning when you've got limited amounts is in the nodes that you need the trade to flow to a specific place. So if we look at the Ivory Coast, for example, it's got 4 exits. So we need to make sure we're pulling trade towards the English Channel. Likewise, in a node with more than one exit, like the Ivory Coast, if only one nation is steering, or everyone is steering in the same direction, all the trade will go in that direction. However, if multiple nations are steering, the trade will be split based on trade power and steering of the nations that are steering. It's also worth pointing out that we can set up the channel in this example to have multiple incoming streams. So we could set up one stream coming down from Asia through the Ivory Coast and up to the English Channel. Then we could set another stream up coming up through the Americas to the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and then coming into the North Sea and the English Channel. We could set up merchants throughout Europe if we had enough trade power to try and bring trade up to Lubeck into the channel, or up through Champagne into the channel. It just depends on where your trade power is at in terms of provinces owned, whether or not you've got the power in Europe to bring the trade in, and how many merchants you've got. So if you've got enough merchants to do it, you try and get as much trade flowing into your home node as you can. Buildings like manufactories and workshops are great to be built anywhere along your trade chain, but remember, the further you steer the trade, the more you increase the value. So, for example, covering India in manufactories will greatly increase the value coming out of India, and then that's multiplied every time you steer it forward. Goods produced modifiers, trade efficiency, and trade steering modifiers are all very powerful for the reasons I spoke about earlier. So the last part of this video, we're going to have a quick discussion around trade companies. So trade companies can be built in any province that is on a different supercontinent to your capital. We did cover this in one of the earlier videos, so we won't go too far into it, but for this example, we can trade company all of this British Bengal region here. So adding a province to a trade company puts the autonomy floor at 90%. However, it reduces the governing costs of the province, which you can see here. So if we just quickly throw this in, you can see the autonomy, it'll update. Okay, we need to let that update, obviously. I'll just let you update. Made a fool of me. Reduces the governing cost of the province. It gives 100% local trade power, and it halves the production malice from the autonomy, and it ignores all penalties for wrong culture and religion. However, probably the two biggest bonuses for trade company when it comes to trade income is the bonus merchants you get and the trade company investments. So if you manage to take over, yeah, so you can see it here. If you manage to take over 50%, 51% of all provincial trade power in a node, you get an extra merchant. So technically you can set up every single trade company region. Is there a map? Yep. So every single trade company region you could get bonus merchants from if you take control of them and add all the provinces to the trade company, which means you can get a huge amount of merchants. The more merchants you have, the more you can place steering, the more you boost your income every time it goes through a node that there's a merchant steering. And the longer chains you can have and the more chains you can have. You could have a chain all the way from China, a chain all the way through the New World, a chain all the way through Europe, all leading into the English Channel. The notable trade company investments which boost trade are the warehouse and depot. So I'll show these now, not in there. Sorry, in here. So the warehouse and the depot, and then you want the office and the exchange. So these are powerful for trade because, as you can see, they add production efficiency, local trade power, production efficiency, and local goods produced. And then the last one is the, where is it? The township, which adds trade value modifier. So those buildings all directly impact the amount of trade, the amount of goods produced, and the amount of trade power that trade company provinces give you. So, what have we learned? Well, hopefully what we've learned is that the best trade practice in EU4 is to dominate your home node, in this case the English Channel, which we don't really dominate. We're only at 46%. We could do a lot better, but obviously this is just a load from a late start date. I haven't been working on this campaign, so I would be, if I was going to play this game from here, I'd be trying to take as much of the English Channel from the mainland and boost my trade as much as I can, boosting these centers of trade up. Oops, wrong one. Boost these centers of trade up, build trade buildings, and just try and dominate this node as much as possible. And then once you've dominated your home node, you want to try and steer as much trade as possible into that node, preferably by long chains of merchants. The further the trade is steered, the more value it has when it reaches its destination. Try to eliminate the competition from nodes so you can push as much value down the chain to your end goal. So, for example, come down to the Ivory Coast, take these centers of trade from the natives, take these centers of trade from your competitors, dominate these nodes where you need to control the flow of trade. If you dominate the Ivory Coast, everything that comes in from Asia can pretty much be steered back to the English Channel. How do you dominate the node? You wipe out the competition, you focus on centers of trade and estuaries, and you can use light ships to boost your trade power, and also build trade buildings and build trade company investments if it's in a trade company zone. And that just about does us for this episode in the EU4 Beginners Tutorial Series on trade. I hope this video has shed some light on what is a bit of an odd system of trade that is very Eurocentric, with the 3 end nodes being in Europe and all trade basically flowing towards Europe. Pick your home node early, set up your game to dominate that home node, and then work to bring as much value into the node so you're swimming in cash. Sounds real simple? Good. Thank you so much for watching this video. Remember, if you enjoyed the comment, leave a like, subscribe to the channel for future content, and please leave a comment, especially if you want to see me do a video on a specific topic that is of interest to you. I'll see you guys in the next video, where we'll probably be looking at starting a country guide, possibly for France or Castile. So thank you again for watching, everyone. Vale!